Job applications just suck now. Recently, I've been engaged in the process of applying for jobs again, because you got to apply for jobs every 2 weeks now. Isn't that fun? Isn't this a fun generation to be in? And the process has just gotten so much harder. I know that I'm not very old, but I am aware that in my parents' generation, you could just walk up to a job and just get an application in person, fill it out, and then give it to them, and then maybe they hire you if you're qualified. You can't really do that anymore. There have been times in my life where I got so frustrated with myself for being unemployed, and I was like, "Oh, you lazy piece of shit! Let's stop being unemployed." So then I was like, "Oh, let's fix this." And I just walked around the neighborhood and I just asked for an application at every business in my neighborhood, and they were all like, "No." And I was like, "Oh, you're not hiring?" And they're like, "No, just apply online." They always use that word, the word just, as if I walked to your location in person because I want to apply online. They're like, "Don't you know you can just apply online?" Oh, thank God, I can just do this much harder process. How about I just do it in person? That's the easy way. That's the one that deserves the word just. Yeah, it's, when you go to apply for these jobs these days, you go through like a site on Indeed. And I have so many friends right now who their process is that they apply to like 100 different jobs on Indeed, and then they get a response from like 20 of them, and then they get like interviews from like 2 of them, and then one of them maybe they actually are qualified for, and who has time to do that? Who has time to apply to like 100 different jobs, literally 100 different ones? And the process, because it's done through not just Indeed, but also every individual employer's website, there's so much duplication of the same information. And it's so tedious. You have to enter the same information over and over again. And you have to make an account a lot of the time, right? So you're entering your name, your email into the Indeed, and then you're entering your name and your email onto your resume, and then you're entering your name and your email to the specific application, and then you're entering your name and your email to the login of the personal website of the employer, and then you're entering your name and email into their application process. That's 5 times. And that's a normal process I just described. Sometimes there are more layers. It's 5 times of the same information. No wonder people are sick of it. Like, it's incredibly tedious. And because these are often individual employers, just like commissioning having a website be built, and the overhead costs can't be too high on something like that, these are shitty websites. These are a disgrace to the nature of 21st century website design, that they're just absolutely poorly built. Anyone who is in any way young or familiar with what a website should look like is going to be just disgraced by these job application sites. And so you send out all these applications, and then you're not even going to get responded to, because the internet and these website application processes have made it so easy to apply for a job that there's now a larger quantity of applications being processed. And, some of them, for all I know, it's somebody who's applying online from Florida and doesn't even understand that this job's on the other end of the country. So this process, it's no longer able to facilitate respect. The employer has no incentive to give a ton of time and energy to everyone who applies, because more people are applying than ever before, and in less scrupulous ways than ever before. So we've destroyed the social contract of the idea that you're supposed to get a call back, of the idea that they're supposed to provide you with confirmation. And even when they do provide you with confirmation, sometimes the confirmation is through an automated system that doesn't even necessarily imply that anyone at the actual company has read your application. So you don't get the realization that there is a human being who knows you're applying for this job, and the comfort that comes with that. And then additionally, because we live in this sort of gig economy structure where employees are changing jobs so frequently, the idea of like a 2-week notice has disappeared. The idea of respect on the employee's part has disappeared. And a lot of people, I'm going to say on the left politically, have just embraced this like, I don't dream of labor, fuck my boss. And like, sure, yeah. Fuck your boss. I agree. Okay. But it's still disturbing that we've sort of implicitly embraced the culture of the gig economy by saying fuck my boss in this particular way. And we should realize that whenever we're saying fuck my boss, they're saying fuck you too. And it goes two ways. This gig economy stuff is a two-way street. It's more flexible for us, sure, but we're more dispensable to our employers as well. And so all of the courtesy in this job application process is tied up in the lack of courtesy employees are expected to give in this application process simultaneously. So really, I think the root of the problem here is sort of a technological problem, right? If I could put my Ted Kaczynski hat on for a second here, one thing that Kaczynski says is that we basically sleepwalk into these new technological systems. We adopt these new technologies, and then they become so easy to utilize that we don't question or criticize the new culture changes and the new economic and political changes that these technologies create in the broader society. So we adopt these things and we just think, oh, it makes it easier for people to apply. And then we don't really actually stop and think about, is the easiest way always the best way? And I think these technologies that facilitate individual freedom, they imply that the easiest way is always the best way. The other scary thing about this new application process is that it sort of ties into a broader trend of viewing alienating human relations to one another as being accessible, right? Oh, well, we're making this more accessible. And the phrasing, it also even implies that it's like helpful to disabled people, for example. I saw this with a lot of protest movements during the pandemic. A lot of them went to Zoom calls, and they went to Zoom calls because of the pandemic, but then they just stayed. They just stayed as Zoom calls, and all IRL interaction was put on the back burner to these Zoom calls. And their logic was that it's better. You know, people who live a little bit farther away don't have to drive as far. And if you're disabled, then it's accessible to you in that way. I think that what we've done is we've now just destroyed the idea of having political groups be a space that creates any kind of real community. Because I'm sorry, but I don't consider a Zoom call real community or real human interaction. It's just not the same. I refuse to philosophically explain that one. If you think a Zoom call is just as satisfying as being in the same room as another human being, something has gone wrong inside of your mind. It's not right. And this alienated process of communication, where we have to communicate through these technologies and where we're never just in person, in real life, where we never have that thickness that comes with real life interaction, that is going to be kind of pushed on us, I think, in the name of accessibility. It is going to be probably liberal, social justice-y type people, in my eyes, that are going to lead the charge to this move to remote work, this move to everything is a Zoom call, the entirety of the protest movements and any kind of activism is all going to be via Zoom calls and Discord servers, and you're not going to be able to say anything about it. Because if you try to push back, then you're making things less accessible. ableist, basically. You're pushing against ease and convenience, and you're not just ableist, you're also maybe making things harder for, say, a single mom who can't get a babysitter for the night, but you can go into her office and take a Zoom call. And they're not wrong that maybe this is more convenient in some limited contexts in that way, but we should live in a world where we have more of these in-person interactions in general. And maybe there are some costs you need to pay for that, but that's okay. like we need this community more than we need accessibility. And that is not going to be borne out, I don't think. I don't think that that we're going to win the fight. I think community is going to lose, and Zoom calls are going to win. What's ironic about this move towards disability accessibility in these conversations is that I feel that this is less accessible, at least for certain types of disabilities. If you have, say, autism or ADHD or any number of other sort of intellectual disabilities, one common practice that people use to help hold your attention and get you to be more productive is body doubling. Merely having another person next to you, with you, monitoring the fact that you are in fact being productive and doing something, and having that person so that you can talk yourself through the process with them. Literally just having another person be there to help you be productive, even if they end up doing nothing, can be a massive help for a lot of people. It's a massive help for me personally. I find it much easier to do these job application processes if I have somebody else with me. I always ask a friend or a family member to kind of like sit with me and just watch me do this job application process. And it makes it more fun too, because you can laugh through it at all the stupid nonsense that you have to experience. And so it's kind of a war of accessibilities, where on one hand, we're making this thing theoretically more accessible, but on the other hand, we are pushing these processes into a format that is much more bureaucratic, much more paperwork driven, and much more inhuman, which is going to be a lot harder for somebody who has, say, ADHD to focus on. Humanity is something a lot more graspable to somebody with a very short attention span. Conversation is going to be much more familiar than entering your name into a field. And I just know from personal experience that anything involving real life human beings is going to be much easier for me to process and engage with in terms of productivity than any sort of an online application system. So moving back to talking about job applications specifically, what is the solution here? Because we probably can't just ban all employers from using the internet. As much as I would probably love that if that happened tomorrow, on a personal note, that's probably an unrealistic policy proposal to try and drive through. We might be able to limit the number of applications they take through the internet, or maybe require that they have an IRL option, right? If we're talking about accessibility, then maybe the most accessible way of doing things is to have the option available to do it whatever way you want, right? Maybe that's an option, to require them to do an IRL option. But I also think in general, one thing we could do that's already being talked about that could help do away with this job application process is just strengthening that bond between employer and employee that has been so thoroughly destroyed by the gigification of our economy. And so one problem on an employer side that you're seeing these days is that employers are not investing as much in workforce training. they don't see an incentive in getting an employee trained up on how to do the job, only for that employee to then quit either halfway through the training process or after the training process is complete, and potentially even working for their competitors. When job changes are as common as they are now, there's very little incentive for employers to actually teach you how to do the job. So they outsource the production of knowledge to higher education and job programs, which they then credential into the applications. So because you're not getting trained as much by your employer on the job at the actual place of employment, they outsource it to other forms of education. And then you get a secondary problem where in order to get a job, you need to have formal qualifications. And you end up with this problem where maybe older, more experienced people from a previous generation, they have years and years of experience, but they can't quantify it as a form of higher education, so they don't get to be treated as the same level of applicant as some young Joe Schmo who sat around in the back of the classroom at a higher education institution and just barely passed and got their degree. So the solutions here could be things like workforce training grants through the government that encourage more workforce training on the part of employers, increased apprenticeship programs through employers, and what's called banning the BA box. All of these proposals that I'm talking about are through an organization called the American Compass, and they are a unique conservative organization that takes great care in paying attention to these issues. They're not free market conservatives like you might be used to from Republicans. They push a very different perspective, and they argue that there is a lot of valuable institutional capacity that has been lost because we've sort of given in to this libertarian free market view that if we just let individual employees and employers do whatever they want, it'll work itself out. So workforce training grants would be great. It would encourage more employers to actually train their employees at the place of business. More apprenticeship programs would be great. I also think probably paid internships would be great and encourage more people to be actually paid to learn on the job. That would make more people want to go and learn on the job. Additionally, there's this policy called banning the BA box. They named it that because it's named after ban the box campaigns for felons. This is a popular sort of social justice issue on the left that if you have a felony and you've served your time, at the moment, you still have to check off on your job applications that you have a felony, and that might make your employer skeptical about hiring you. And they're skeptical about hiring you even before you've gotten far enough along the process to get an interview. They might just throw your application out entirely. And so banning that box does not remove the ability for an employer to decide not to hire you. It doesn't even remove their ability to decide not to hire you because you're a felon. It just requires you to go a little bit farther along in the job application process before they're able to actually make that decision to not hire you. Similarly, banning the BA box is banning the box on the application where you have to check off whether or not you have a bachelor's degree. This is especially helpful for working class people who didn't necessarily get a higher education, but who are doing blue collar work in the economy and who, when they go to apply, have to check off that they don't have a bachelor's degree and are immediately dismissed without even an interview or any formal discussion of their qualifications. Once you get past that point and get your foot in the door, maybe you can vouch for yourself and show that you're very professional and that you're very hardworking. But if you can't even get your foot in the door, then you never stand a chance. And one of the things that I think is really shameful about having found these policies through the American Compass is, again, this is a conservative think tank, and they seem like they care more about working class people at the American Compass. They care more about this policy proposal than any socialist that I found. Socialists didn't come up with this policy. We have an entire political left that was unable to come up with the idea that maybe something working class people need is to be hired at jobs. That didn't occur to them, despite the fact that working class is like their whole political modus operandi. I think it's a darn shame that we've got a right wing that is maybe doing a better job handling the interests of the absolute poorest and working class employment as an issue than leftists and socialists are.